Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Test Continuously and Autonomously because every second literally matters. Before we dive into today's presentation, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have a question at any point during the presentation, please submit it via the Q&A window. We will address your questions throughout the conversation and at the end of the presentation. Also, the recorded version of today's presentation will be available following the event. Please look for an email from the Kentic team to rewatch and share the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, Anil Murty, Director of Product Management at Kentic. Anil, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Angela. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy days to join us today. So for the webinar today, we noticed that we have a mix of existing Kentic customers, as well as folks that we hope would be customers in the future. So to start with, we figured it'll be nice to just do a quick introduction of who Kentic or what Kentic is. So just to talk a little bit about us, we've been around for a little bit over 6 years now. And we have a little more than 250 customers across the enterprise as well as the service provider segments. And in terms of what we provide, we essentially provide a cloud-based network observability platform that our customers depend on to see, fix, and run any network. So we use full stack telemetry, gather and correlate traffic, routing, synthetics, events, config, and metrics from all your network infrastructure. And then we give network professionals the insights they need about their network's performance and how to optimize the user's digital experience. So that's a little bit about us. Now, before we get into the meat of this presentation, which is synthetics, we just wanted to do a quick poll to find out what the relative experience of the people on the call today is with synthetic monitoring. So you should be seeing a poll question on your screen now. If you could take a few minutes to just answer that for us, it would really help us. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll give everybody a few more seconds to answer the poll. Okay. All right, Anil, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it and the poll here.
Cool.
And here we go. Let me share the results.
Cool. So it looks like we have a pretty even mix here. There's people, approximately 20% that do not have a solution today, but are planning to get one. 30% have something today, but are looking to change. And then the rest seem like they're mostly interested. So cool. Sounds good. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. So in terms of, given that we have some people on this call that may not be familiar completely with the synthetic solution, is to provide a really quick introduction to synthetics in general. The idea with synthetics is, sending synthesized or essentially simulated traffic in addition to regular flow traffic, and sort of sending it along the same paths that your regular flow traffic would be flowing, or along alternate paths, so you can do a comparison, and then looking at various metrics that you would look at for regular flow traffic, right? So similar metrics. And so the way we, as a company, decided on building synthetics was essentially sort of driven by what we were hearing from our customers. So we had a lot of conversations with our existing customers who, were ingesting flow data from us. And we heard a couple of sort of main themes from these conversations. Number one was the more obvious one, which is, it'll be really nice to be able to look at real traffic alongside synthetic traffic. So we obviously look at real traffic right now. Being able to look at synthetic tests and their metrics alongside that and sort of correlate both those together would be really nice. And then the second thing we heard was, all the existing synthetic solutions out there mostly test at a minute or higher. In some cases, they test every 5 minutes or every 30 minutes. And given the way applications have been moving to more and more demanding and real-time use cases, being able to test at an almost continuous rate was really important. And so we heard those two things and we said, okay, for the first one, in addition to sort of providing both of these types of metrics, real flow data as well as synthetics alongside, We can probably go a step further and make it easy to even set up these tests by essentially leveraging flow data to automatically create these tests for our customers so that they don't have to spend a lot of time and effort creating these tests and maintaining them over time. So that's one of our key innovations, and we refer to it as autonomous scenario-based testing. And then the other one is, given that we've been in the business of ingesting large amounts of flow data, billions and billions of records, on a hourly basis, we figured that synthetic data is relatively smaller in terms of its scale and size, and so it is our platform is uniquely positioned to be able to ingest and run synthetic tests at a very, very high rate, as fast as every second. And so that's where the continuous testing differentiator comes in. And then outside of that, you'll see as I get into the demo next, we support all the standard use cases around testing both at the network layer as well as the higher layers, and then be able to correlate metrics across those and show you a visualization which helps you get to the problems. Outside of that, you'll also see that we out the gate support a bunch of global agent locations. We have a pretty expansive network of global agents, and so out of the box, you're pretty much set up to be able to do the kinds of tests that you want. So with that, without spending a whole lot of time on slideware, I'm going to switch over to a demo and show you a little bit about our product. So just to sort of start with just the Kentic platform as a whole. As I mentioned, Kentic has been in the business of ingesting real flow data. And so our main platform is a flow product. And so what you're looking at right now is that Network Explorer view, which is kind of the default view. And so here you're looking at real traffic flowing across a given network. It could be completely on-prem. It could be in the cloud. It could be a hybrid of both of those. And so all of that traffic is represented here. You can do things like capacity planning and so on and so forth. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this portion of the product because the focus today is synthetics, which is the new thing that we've introduced. So I'm going to jump right into synthetics. But before I do that, sort of at a high level, like any other synthetic, like most synthetic products you've probably seen out there, if you're using one today, there are three main areas to synthetic testing. The first is what we refer to as a fleet of global and private agents, and these are basically pieces of software deployed across the world and within your networks as well that you can use to conduct tests between each of these points or from each of these points to any sort of destinations, which could be an IP address or host name. So that's what we refer to as our fleet of agents, and that's where that can be visualized under agent management. And then there are the tests that you can set up using those agents, either between those agents or between the agent and any sort of destination. And so that is covered under Test Control Center. And then last but not the least is all the data that comes in from those tests. And so the primary place where you would see that data is what we refer to as the performance dashboard under synthetics. So I'm going to start with the performance dashboard and then go into agent management, Test Control Center, and then come back and finish off with the performance. So to start with, the performance dashboard is sort of your main ongoing dashboard that you would look at if you had synthetic monitoring from us. And so what you're seeing here is a view where, first off, you can look at sort of the state of your network right now. And there are two key elements here. There is what we refer to as the incident log. And so this is a running sort of indicator of any alerts that are currently triggered in the system. So you can hover over this and you can look at, various points in time and what sort of alerts were open at that particular time. And you can choose to go back in time. So right now it's showing you a default of 1 day, but you can go back all the way to 30 days or as less as 5 minutes or any custom range between those. And then for each of these, it's going to show you, what the status is, whether it's currently active or it's cleared. In case of things that were cleared, when did it start and when did it end? And then a link to the actual test that's alerting at that particular time. And then so on an ongoing basis, in the ideal case scenario, you come into this dashboard and you would see this thumbs up sign that says everything's good and nothing to worry about. But if you noticed any orange or red sections here, you could go onto them. The other thing that you see below this is what we refer to as our network performance meshes. And I'll talk a little bit about how these are set up when I talk about the test setup portion of the demo. But essentially what these are showing is what we refer to as a mesh style test. So this could be you testing between, if you're a service provider, you might be interested in testing connectivity between your various data centers. Or if you support customers that have a hybrid deployment, it could be tests between cloud as well as on-prem data centers. And so this is that sort of test. So it's an n-by-n matrix where every location is testing every other location. And so what you can do from here is, you can look at this and say, are there any areas, quickly get a sense for whether there are any issues happening in the network. So if you saw a grid like this and everything looked green, then everything is good. But if you saw a grid and there are certain points where there are orange or red dots, then you can hover over them. And you can see that, there's a couple of pieces of information that are available here. First off, the 3 dots signify the 3 main metrics that you look for when doing network tests. So that is latency, packet loss, and jitter. And, when you hover over a given cell within this grid, it not only shows you the metrics for that specific path, but it also shows you the metrics for the reverse path. Because as I mentioned, this is a mesh style test. So every node is testing every other node in this test. So that's the network performance meshes. So these are the 2 main dashboard elements that we have in the product on the main dashboard today. And then over time, we'll be looking at adding more of these into this. On the right side here, what you're looking at is basically a quick summary of your credit utilization. And this also comes from all the feedback we heard during our customer conversations while building this product. We heard a lot about, clear visibility about my usage and my spend is really important. And so we made sure we make that pretty front and center and make it clear to understand. And then at the bottom here, you can see the total number of private agents, the total number of global or cloud agents, and I'll talk a little bit about what those mean. The other thing that you see, other tab that you see on the performance dashboard here is what we refer to as the SAS Application Tab, and you'll notice that it says free here. So essentially, the way this came about is, a lot of our customers said there are a lot of applications that employees depend on, and we typically have to set up tests towards these internal applications that employees use. And, this is something that we spend a lot of credits on, and it'll be nice for us to find a way to sort of make all these tests common to all the customers. And so what we said is, let's go ahead and create tests towards each of these common applications and make them available to all of our customers for free. So the SAS Applications tab is essentially a tab that's available to all of our customers right out of the box. And each of these tests are essentially testing from 15 different global locations towards that specific SAS application. So in this case, we're testing towards ADT, and we're testing from all of our global locations. And we're running ping tests every minute to this target, and we're showing you the metrics. So all of these tests are ready out of the box for any customers that use our product, and they do not require you to spend credits towards them. If you want to customize these tests and sort of test it with your own, you can do that as well. So you can do that easily from here by simply cloning this particular test. Jumping into agent management. So as I mentioned, agent management is where you would go and look at all the agents that are available to you. And so in terms of the nomenclature of how we describe our agents, essentially, there's 2 broad categories here. There are what we refer to as global agents or public cloud agents. And these are agents that Kentic hosts in its own infrastructure and provides to you for use, or provides to our customers for use. And those are all indicated by the Kentic logos on this chart. So as I zoom into the chart, first off, you'll see that we have a pretty wide coverage of agents across the world, all continents. And all the agents all the points here that have the Kentic logo on them are global and public cloud agents, and so they're hosted by us. I can hide the private agents, and so now you'll just see the global agents here. And so you can see that it's pretty wide across all public cloud instances as well. So in terms of public cloud coverage, we have all the main ones here. So we have Microsoft Azure, GCP, AWS, Alibaba, and IBM Cloud. And then the global agents are agents that are running within data centers of our customers and partners. So there's a pretty extensive out here, well over 200 agents between those. And then moving on to the second category, this is what we refer to as private agents. So these are agents that you could deploy on your own infrastructure, and these would only be visible and available to you, unlike the global and public cloud agents, which are available to all of our customers. So in terms of deploying a private agent, the deployment of these is extremely easy. The instructions are right here. So it says deploy private agent. If I click on that, and click on View Setup Procedures, you can see that we have options for Debian, RPM, and Docker. And in each case, the setup is just 3 steps. It's pulling the binary, running a command to install it, and then running a command to associate it with a specific instance. And then we have support for both x86 as well as ARM. So if you had ARM-based architectures running, you can run these agents with those as well. So that's agent management. Let's go and look at the test control center. So the test control center is where you would go and look at all the tests that are configured in your Kentic portal for synthetics. And for each of these tests, you can see what the status of the test is right now. You can look at what specific type of test it is. So is it a hostname test, an ASM test, so on and so forth. And then who created it, who last updated it in terms of the users, and the total number of agents involved in that test, as well as the amount of monthly credits that each of these tests consume, right? So again, we're very, very sensitive to making sure that we provide visibility in terms of credit consumption. And so you see that reflected here as well. You also see up top here, a sort of running total credits used this month, as well as the projection based on all the tests that are configured in the system right now. And then a similar projection for what your consumption would be next month based on the things that are configured right now. Now, you can also filter down to specific test types here. So you can only look at HTTP tests or just look at IP address tests, for example, so on and so forth. Moving on to describe the types of tests that we offer today. So I click on the Add Test page here. And so here's where you can see the various types of tests that we support, and it's something that we're constantly adding more and more to. So you'll see things that say coming soon, and those are things that will be in the product pretty soon. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there are people on this call, customers of ours, who probably looked at this a few days ago and see new things in this. So it's pretty much given that it's a SaaS platform, it's constantly evolving. So broadly, in terms of the tests that we offer, there are 3 main types of tests here. There are what I refer to as the most basic user-defined tests. So these would be tests where you have a specific destination in mind. That could be an IP address or a host name or a specific SaaS application, or it might be an HTTP server or a DNS server that you want to test towards. And once you have that in mind, you can set up a test to that specific destination. So in case of an IP address test, you'd enter the IP address here. You would pick the agents that you want to test from. And these could be a combination of your own private agents as well as the global or public agents that are available to you. You can pick any number of these agents. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick a couple of ones here as an example. And then you can give it a name. And you'll notice that as I was picking these agents, it updates again the total number of credits that will be utilized by the specific test. And so if I take out an agent, you'll see that this updates right here. So a pretty good indication there as well. We have a few advanced options that you can configure per test. So one of the key ones here, which is kind of one of the main focuses of this presentation, is we are uniquely positioned, as I mentioned, to be able to test at a very, very high frequency, pretty much continuously. So you have the option for ping tests and for any network test, basically, to be able to run a test as frequently as every second. So what that means is if you have, and some of our customers have this, they have very latency sensitive applications where the amount of latency or jitter experienced in the network is directly correlated to the amount of tolerance that they have to include in their application. And so being able to see the slightest change in network performance is super important. And so that's where the submitted tests come in really handy. We have options for configuring how the alerts get sent to you on the incident log. And then we have options for adjusting the number of probes, both for the ping as well as trace probes. And I'll talk about what the trace probes do. You have the option of picking ICMP or TCP for ping, and then UDP or TCP for the trace probes. So coverage in terms of protocols there. Going back to the test control center to talk a little bit about the other types of tests. So I talked about the IP address test. As I mentioned, that's a user-defined test, and it's in the network area. The hostname SAS application is similar to that, except you'd be picking a hostname in case of the hostname test or another agent in case of the agent-to-agent test. I'll talk a little bit about the HTTP server tests and the DNS server tests next before talking about the slightly more complex ones. So an HTTP server test, again, is a specific URL that you want to test towards, and we will run the equivalent of an HTTP GET towards that URL. And you have the option of also enabling a ping and trace route towards that same IP address that is returned from resolving the specific HTTP URL. Same sort of theme here. You pick the agents that you want to test from. Could be a combination of private and public agents. The advanced options look a little bit different here. Given that this is an HTTP test that's going to resolve to one or more servers under it, you have the option of testing only v4 or only v6 or both v4 and v6. So if you're interested in specifically filtering down to one type of protocol family, you can do that. Other test options similar here. So hopefully that makes sense. And then moving on to the server monitor test. Here you can specify one or more DNS servers and a host name to look up, and then you can specify the record type as well as a target port test towards. Hopefully that makes sense. The ones that I want to spend the most time on are the ones I think where you'll see the most value in terms of our uniqueness of combining flow data with synthetic data. And so the first of those is what we refer to as the autonomous tests. So the autonomous tests are autonomous two ways. The first way that they're autonomous is that you don't have to have a specific a destination like an IP address or a host name in mind in order to set up these tests. All you have to have is an intent to test towards a specific type of entity. And this entity might be an ASN, it might be a CDN, it might be a country or a region or a city. So all you got to say is, hey, I'm interested in knowing the performance towards this specific type of entity. So for example, you can say, I want to test towards a specific ASN. And so what we'll do when you click on this is if you have one or more flow devices also sending us flow traffic, which is real network traffic, we can run a query and quickly figure out what ASNs, in this case, it's an ASN. So what ASNs have traffic going from your sites towards them. So in this case, as you can see, the query ran and it said, these are all the ASNs that have traffic going towards them. One of them is already has a test configured. So it's saying that it's already monitored as part of your synthetic tests. And then it's saying all of these are not monitored. So you can choose to pick one that's not monitored. And then when I do that, you'll see another query run here. And what's happening now is based on your selection of an ASN, we are now going and finding sites that have traffic, sites of yours that have traffic going towards that ASN. And if you happen to have an agent installed in any of these locations, we would give you an option to run a test from that agent towards that ASN. In this case, there doesn't seem to be an agent here, so I'm going to pick the first one and see if there's any queries returned with an agent. So in this case, you can see that the Acme SJC1 data center has 4 agents installed. So I have an option of adding one of these agents. And so I click on add over there. And what's going to happen now is we are going to set up tests from this agent towards that ASN. And what we will do is we'll run a query to to find specific IP addresses within this ASN that have traffic coming from this site with this agent in it, and will automatically set up tests towards each of those IP addresses. The advanced options here, what you can do is, aside from the other options that I talked about before, you also have the option of specifying how often you would like to repeat this query. So by default, every 12 hours, we'll repeat the query of finding new IP addresses within this ASN that have traffic coming from this site. But you have the option of changing that. So you can say, run that same query every hour, and then now every hour we'll find new IP addresses and we'll add them to the list of tests that we run. You can also, run the same query by outbound traffic. So when we say by inbound traffic, this is basically inbound traffic coming in from that ASN versus traffic that's going towards that ASN. Or if you just like to manually pick an ASN, you have the option of doing that as well. So you can see a full list of all the ASNs that we see, and you can pick one manually and then create tests towards it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift over and show you an example of what the results look like from this sort of a test. So I'm going to go ahead and pick ASN in the filter here. And I'm going to pick the second one here, which is a test towards a DigitalOcean ASN. So wait for this one to load. And then what I'll do is I'll actually hit edit test so that you actually get a sense again for what was set up here. So in this case, we said we want to test towards the DigitalOcean ASN, and we want to test from a combination of 3 private agents and a whole bunch of public cloud and global agents here. And then, we said we want to repeat the same query every 12 hours. So going back to the results here, what you will see is that, for each of the agents, which basically represent sites where they're installed, we have run a query and found IP addresses within the target ASN. And we have set up, one test each to each of those IP addresses. So we're doing a ping every minute, since that's the setting specified in the advanced settings, to each of these IP addresses. What you'll see here is obviously, there's the standard latency, jitter, and packet loss metrics. And so there's average latency, packet loss, and jitter to each of these destinations. And but in addition to that, we're also able to pull out information about the provider type and the connectivity type. If there is real traffic flowing between these points, between the site where the agent is installed and the destination IP, we would also indicate that traffic right here so that you get an indication of, if a test is not performing very well, how much traffic is that impacting. And then up top here is a SAN key representation, which is basically showing you the traffic as it flows between these points. So going from each of these locations where the agents were picked towards each of the destinations and sort of what path they're taking along the way. And then at the end, you can see the total traffic. So that's the main representation of our ASN tests. From here, I can go into the details of each of these tests. So when I click on that, it'll show me one specific test. So this is one of the agents from Dallas testing towards an IP address that we found. It shows the 3 metrics here: latency, packet loss, and jitter. But what's also interesting is that alongside, you also get a view of the actual traffic. So if you have actual traffic flowing here, you can correlate that actual traffic to the synthetic metrics that you see down here. So that's an example of an ASN test. The similar concept applies to these other tests. So in case of CDN, rather than running a query to figure out ASNs, we would run the same query and we would instead find any CDNs that you might have. So in this case, it's showing you Netflix and Akamai and all of these CDNs. But the general idea is the same thing. You'd pick a CDN and you'd get a list of agents that you can test from or sites you can test from. So, and then the same concept for testing a specific country or region or city. All right, so moving on to the third type of test that we offer. And this is going to be particularly interesting, I think, to customers that have many data centers and they're trying to test connectivity between them. So one of the things that we heard from customers that were using other solutions or using in-house solutions is in trying to set up a test where you want to test sort of from one point to any n number of points in sort of a matrix fashion. So you might have 6 data centers as this diagram shows you. and you want to test from every data center to every other data center here. If you had to set up these one by one for an n by n matrix, you're looking at setting up n times n minus 1 tests. So in this particular example, you have 6 data centers. So that would require setting up 6 times 5 or 30 individual tests. And so that can be pretty time consuming when you get to a large number of these. So what we said is, let's make it really easy to set up these tests. And so all you have to do in case of Kentic is click on this edit agent button and just pick all the agents where you have sites or where you want to test from. And these can be a combination of your own private agents again, and as well as global or public agents. And just go ahead and pick any set of these agents. So in this case, I've picked 5 of these. I'll hit save. And then this is going to go ahead and create a mesh test between all of these agents. So it'll basically test from this agent to every other agent, and then similarly for the other ones. You have the option of turning on or off the local IP option. And so this is really useful when you're testing a bunch of sites or a bunch of agents that are within your own network. So you want to be testing completely internally. And so these are all IP addresses that are within your own local network. And so turning on that local IP will enable you to do that. And I'll actually go back and show you where you can configure that local IP for the agents as well. But before I do that, I want to show you, go back to the how this gets presented. So now that you've seen how this site mesh test gets set up, essentially the data gets presented in this fashion. And I talked a little bit about this. So it's basically, this is site mesh test between all of these sites. So that's that. And then before I forget, the specifying the local IP can be done by clicking on a given agent. And then you get a whole bunch of information about the agent. And you also get to configure a local IP here. So if you're testing within your own network, you can do that as well. So that's the main types of tests that we have in the system today. If you're looking at a product today, check back on an ongoing basis, and you'll see more of these new tests get added over time. So that's kind of the main overview of our product. Going back to the performance dashboard, as I said, I would. On an ongoing basis, you would come in here and you could click on a given test, and it'll take you basically to the results of that test. And so in this case, it's running an HTTP test. And in case of an HTTP test, the kinds of metrics that we output. Actually, let me do this. Let me go and pick one. This particular test didn't have the ping option picked, so it doesn't show you results there. But I'm going to go ahead and find a different one that does have that, hopefully. Let's pick this one. This one doesn't either. But you can see in this case, at least that, we show you the average time taken to the last byte. So this would be timing from the point that a DNS resolution request is made towards that specific HTTP test or HTTP endpoint to the point that we get the very last byte. And then we also show you the response code that is returned. If you click on the details of this, you will see the HTTP latency graphed over time. So time series data of that specific HTTP response time, and then the change in the status code over time. So I configured this test specifically to randomly return a different status code. And so this is something I can do here with this QRL. But in a typical test, you'll probably not see this much variation, but this is, I specifically did this to show you sort of how this varies over time. So that's the HTTP test and sort of how you can get to it from the main performance dashboard. Example of a DNS test, pick this one here. So in case of DNS tests, we'll show you the DNS resolution time, and we'll show you the results returned as well. And then you can go into the details here and look at that over time. And again, these metrics are something that we will continue to add more things into over time. So that's that. The last thing I want to talk about, which I think a lot of people have found to be extremely useful and have been sort of wowed by it, is what we call the path experience. And so I'll pick an IP address test. And so in this case, we're testing the Cloudflare DNS test. And so we're testing from a combination of private and global agents towards Cloudflare DNS, and we're getting all these metrics back. What I can do from here is I can actually jump into the path experience. So I click on the path tab here. What you're looking at now is essentially we are running every minute, which is the default. We'll run 3 probes from each of these agents towards the destination. So you have the option of specifying either use UDP or TCP probes. So in the traceroute options here, you can pick the total number of probes that you run every minute. By default, will set it to 3, and you have the option of picking either UDP or TCP, depending on what you think is going to work better for your specific network. So in this case, it's running 3 probes, and these are UDP probes that are sent with an increasing. Sorry, go back to this. With an increasing TTL value, and so as we get the ICMP responses from each of the nodes, we will attempt to build out a trace and a path UI from that. So you can hover over each of these agents, and it will show you the location where that specific agent is located in terms of the exact city, the ASN, as well as the IP address of the agent. So I can do that for all the agents, and then I can do a similar thing for each of these nodes here as well. Actually, I'm just going to zoom in so it's a little bit more clear. So I can hover over each of these nodes, and I can see the IP address, the ASN as part of, and the location. What I can also see is the latency experienced by the packets as they're going through that specific node, right? And then within the options here, I have the option of collapsing this view down to the ASNs. So if I did that, now you can see that same path, but collapsed down to the ASNs. So if you're trying to if you have a path that traverses multiple ASNs and you're trying to find where the bottleneck might be, you can do this, and then you can hover over it, and it'll show you the max link latency and the specific ASNs. So in this case, it's a packet ASN, and Amazon, and so on and so forth. So you have that option there. You can show or hide agents from here. So if I click that, now the Acme server agent is gone, and then it's back again. And then you have the option also of highlighting specific nodes with a latency, with a loss threshold, and then links with a latency threshold. So right now, the latency for this is set to 1 millisecond, and so it's highlighting links that are exceeding that. So if I hover over this red link here, it's showing that it's a latency of 1.6 milliseconds, which is more than 1, and so that's highlighted similarly here. And then the last thing here, which is kind of interesting, which is given that we are able to guess or make a pretty good determination of where a specific node is located, we can then take a guess as to what the expected latency is going to be between any 2 given nodes of this trace, because we know the location of this node and the location of this node. And so what we can do, if you turned on this option here, is we can then make a guess as to whether the latency that we are measuring is more than what we expect it to be based on the location of those nodes. So this is turned on now, and it'll show you any links that exceed that. Going back, I'll just find another test so I can actually show you the Traceroute Explorer. In this case, there is no changes to AS path that happened over this time. If there were changes to the path that would have happened, you would have seen them up top in the Traceroute Explorer. So I'm going to go see if I can find a different test that shows us that. Find that one. And then, so in this case, it's a test that is being tested in a site mesh style. So you've got basically paths going from agents towards specific destinations. And what you're seeing up top here is what we refer to as the Traceroute Explorer. And what it will show you is it'll highlight any points in time where the path changed. So I'm going to go down to the collapse ASN view here. Unfortunately, there's only one ASN here, so it may not look as dramatic. But if I hover over these blue dots now, blue circles, you'll see that it's pointing out that there was an AS path change that happened. Point, or the number of hops changed as well. So do that. You can also go back to the node view and then look at this as well. So this is really important when you're trying to debug issues that may have stemmed from route changes happening within your networks. So that's a good example of that. And I think that is pretty much the extent of all the things I wanted to show. Oh, actually, I did remember something. So the other thing that's really interesting, and I'll talk about this on the slide when we go back to the slides, is if you're a new customer that's trialing the product, or you're a customer that's just starting to use synthetics, you also have the option of going to a demo environment. So if you don't have a lot of tests set up and you just want to look at ready data and visualize how it looks, you can click on the demo environment, and that will basically take you to an environment where we generate a lot of the data ourselves and present it to you. So there's a whole bunch of these tests that are pre-configured by us that you have access to, and you can just sort of play around with the product and get a sense for it. And then we also have a guided tool that talks about what you're looking at. So that kind of concludes the demo portion of this. I'm going to go back to the slides and continue on from there. So just to sort of recap what you looked at, hopefully from the demo, you were able to understand how Kentic, because of its unique position of having both flow data as well as synthetic testing, is able to save you a lot of time by setting, by sort of automating the test setup as well as maintenance of these tests autonomously, right? And then given that we're able to ingest a ton of data and do it at scale, we're able to offer you the ability to test continuously so that you don't miss any sort of things that happen for a very short period of time. Setting up and visualizing complex site mesh style tests is extremely easy to both set up as well as to sort of visualize. And then path analysis is really useful if you're trying to get to the root of a problem. So you see an alert, you see what test was failing, and then you want to find out if it was caused because of a path change or because of a certain node running out of memory or CPU utilization or resources. You can do that using the path analysis. And then, of course, being able to map synthetic data with real-world traffic in a unified view is something I think a lot of our customers find extremely useful. And then similarly, being able to correlate, network layer traffic with higher layer traffic. So if all of that sounded exciting to you, and you haven't checked out our product yet, so then I would strongly recommend heading over to kentic.com. And what we have there is basically the option to start a 30-day free trial. And so you can go ahead and click on the Try Kentic button that you see on kentic.com. And we just ask you a couple of, not too much information, just who you are and email address. And once you set that up, you'll have access to all the test types that I showed you today, as well as all the global and public cloud agents. So you'd be able to get started without having to install any of your agents. If you wanted to install your own private agents, you can install any number of private agents. So there's no limit on that during the trial. And every trial, everybody that signs up for a trial gets a fairly generous number of test credits so that you can actually test out the product during the course of your trial. And then to make your onboarding into the product really easy, we've basically created a two-step onboarding process to sort of get you set up with the test to begin with. And then once you're in the product, if you're trying to get familiar with the product and you've not had a chance to look at this video or had to drop off, you have two options. You can go through a guided tour, which will start as soon as you get into the product, or you can go into the demo mode, which I showed you right at the end of my demo. So with that, we'll take any questions. Angela, are there any questions that we can answer?
Yes, we had one come in through the chat. And if you have any questions, definitely put those in the chat or in the Q&A box and we'll get to those. But so the first question is SIP tests, about SIP tests. Do we have any coming at some point? Anil, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. So SIP tests and VoIP tests in general are something that we hear about quite a bit. And so it's definitely on our roadmap. Tentatively, we would look at it sometime early next year is where we're looking at SIP tests.
Okay. The next question is, how do you charge for synthetic tests?
Yeah, so synthetic tests are only charged. So first off, we don't charge for any agents. You can install any number of your private agents. You can use any number of global agents, no problem. The only time we charge you is when you actually configure tests. And typically, if you're running a ping test, for example, if you're running it from a global agent, which is something that we host, it's 5 test credits per test. And it's if it's originating from a private agent, which is something that you would host, it would be 2.5 credits per test, per 1 minute test.
Okay, great. So we have 2 more questions that have come in. How would you get alerts programmatically? And then the second part of that question is, are there any specific application tests apart from HTTP?
Yeah, so the first question, if you're familiar with Kentic's API platform, we have a pretty extensive API for our platform in general. We are in the process of adding support for synthetics APIs to that same API platform. And, our customers in general have loved our support for APIs. So we definitely want to make sure we support that. And so we are targeting having support for APIs in synthetics before the end of the year. And, we look at alerts as part of that, either this year or early next year.
Okay, great.
And there was another question, I think, which was, the application layer test. So as is noted, HTTP layer test or the HTTP server test is sort of the first type of test in a series of tests that we hope to add in the application layer. So some of the next ones that we're currently in the process of finalizing or discussing the requirements for are page load tests and potentially tests towards a specific API endpoint. And then we'd look at other ones over time. If there are specific types of use cases that you have around application layer testing, then please reach out to me or through our channels to find out more.
Perfect. Thank you. And then we have time for one last question, I think. So we have one more come in. Do existing customers get any free credits or access to credits?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, absolutely. Existing customers that are on the Kentic Pro or premium platforms, they get a certain number of credits every month. So a certain number of free synthetic test credits every month to set up synthetic tests. And you should reach out to your specific, if you're a customer, you should reach out to your specific account team to figure out what those credits are. But there are a decent number of credits that will let you at least test the platform and understand if it's something that is of value to you, if not actually be able to do actual tests.
Okay, actually, we did have one more question come in. I think we can take it. So, are the correlations visual as you showed, or can you get them automatically?
Automatically, as in, I guess it's sort of a follow-up question. So I guess I can interpret automatically as one of 2 ways. One is getting it programmatically through an API. So the answer to that is yes, we intend to support a pretty extensive API for synthetic, both from a test creation standpoint as well as test reading standpoint. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other way I can interpret automatic is being able to look at something that we refer to as insights, which if you're familiar with Kentic's platform, you've seen it in the flow side of the product. We intend to add support for insights to Kentic Synthetics as well. So, if we saw a IP address test failing and then an HTTP server test failing, which had the same IP address, for example, we would look at correlating those two and surfacing that up as an insight, as an example. It's not something that's in the product today, but it's something that we intend to look at over time.
Okay, perfect. So that wraps up our questions.
Cool. All right. Move on to the next slide here. So we have another quick poll. If you guys would help us out, we're just curious if you found this webinar helpful, just so we can sort of plan out the next set of webinars better for you.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So looks like good responses are coming in, and I'll end it shortly.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. I think we're good.
Very nice. Cool. Thank you so much for doing that. And then let's see. So yeah, so just a quick reminder again, if you missed it previously, you can get started today with a trial. So head over to kentic.com and get that started. And then if you have any other questions or are interested in learning more, you can email us at webinars@kentic.com, and then we'll route that question to the right person, more likely to me, and I'll reach out. So I think that concludes our presentation for today. Thank you again so much for taking time out of your days to join us. And we hope to hear from you, and hopefully you'll try out the product. Thank you.